Before we talk about cognitive psychology, let's touch on its predecessor, behavioral psychology. Ivan Pavlov conditioned dogs to salivate at the sound of a bell. B.F. Skinner trained rats and pigeons to pull a lever when they wanted food. These two examples highlight two of the most famous behavioral psychologists, and two of the most well-known experiments in the history of behavioral psychology. Before the 1950s, behavioral psychology monopolized the field of psychology. That is, until cognitive psychology came into the picture. Cognitive psychology is a division of psychology that studies the mental processes of memory, attention, problem-solving, emotion, intelligence, learning ability, and perception. To give you an example, the knowledge we have of what a baby can and can't perceive and understand is within the scope of the field of cognitive psychology. A baby may look at himself in the mirror at 18 months, but not associate his reflection with himself. Just 3 months later at 21 months, he can recognize his own reflection as an image of himself. How amazing! The cognitive revolution expanded beyond just cognitive psychology. It encompassed the fields of education, experimental psychology, studying the human mind in a lab or in an experiment, linguistics, study of language, computer science, artificial intelligence, and neuroscience. Traditional behavioral psychologists might not have been ready for cognitive psychology until its birth in the 1950s. After all, behavioral psychology was what made psychology a respectable science, because it experimented with objective behaviors that could be translated into meaningful, scientific data. Cognition, by contrast, is subjective, therefore making it more difficult to experiment with. Cognitive psychology became the dominant form of psychology in the 1950s and 1960s in an intellectual era we call the cognitive revolution. The cognitive revolution was pioneered by a number of scholars from Harvard University, including George Miller, Noam Chomsky, Jerome Bruner, and Ulrich Neisser. George Miller took computer science concepts of information processing and working memory and applied it to humans. He conducted a famous experiment that concluded that humans could remember an average of 7 items at a time, plus or minus 2. He published an article entitled "The Magical Number 7, plus or minus 2, Some Limits on Our Capacity for Processing Information" in 1956. This revolutionary article and its findings had major implications for the way that humans learn. Also in 1956 came Jerome Bruner's A Study of Thinking, which was considered a pioneering work in the field of cognitive psychology and much credited for the commencement